Welcome to the Embodiment Matters podcast with me, Erin Giesemann Rabke, and my husband, Carl Rabke. Embodiment Matters is an ongoing, rich conversation about what it really means to be embodied and why and how embodiment matters so much in our daily lives and in our modern world. You can find out more about our wonderful guests, about our work. You can sign up for our newsletter and find out how to become a supporting member of our podcast online at embodimentmatters.com. Hi friends, it's Erin here, and I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. I got to speak with and interview in this one my dear friend, Sunny Rose Healey, who is an Ayurvedic practitioner and teacher who is located in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She also is a student of life and birth and medicine under the tutelage of indigenous medicine teachers and magnificent midwives. She's also a working mom, has two beautiful young kids, and we have this great conversation about Ayurveda and how this ancient wisdom comes from Indian culture and is understood as a sister science to yoga, how this can help us sort of realign ourselves with natural rhythms and with the orientation toward well-being that we already deeply know inside our own bones. It's just a really inspiring conversation. I loved our conversation about supporting digestion, not only of foods, but of everything we are taking in, including information. I loved our exploration of self-care practices and also a really wise set of 4 questions to ask when you're wondering if something is good for you or not. Anyway, I think you'll enjoy this episode so much. There's a lot of great wisdom and practical application in it. You can find out more about Sunny, her services, and her herbal product company at mamaayurveda.com. It's MAMAYURVEDA.com. And enjoy the episode. So welcome, Sunny. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to talk to you too.
So, I have so many questions that I want to ask you, and it's such a big topic, Ayurveda and the work that you do, that I wonder if it might be great to start with just some basic overview of what is Ayurveda, or how do you hold what you share about that?
Okay, let me start with maybe the most basic thing, which is the definition of Ayurveda, because the word Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word, and it comes from 2 words, Ayuhu, which means life, and Veda, which means science. So Ayurveda is the science of life, and it's basically the science of how to live, and basically the science of how to live in a body with a mind and a soul and a spirit. So there's a lot of guidance coming from Ayurveda. And it's also referred to as the science of longevity. So not just how to live, but how to thrive and really be well and live a long, happy, healthy life.
It's so good. So I know both of us have been interested in Ayurveda for a long time, and you have gone deep in your education and just the work that you're offering with that. And we were saying before I pressed record that I love Ayurveda. I think about it often. And especially at this time of year with the seasonal change, we're moving into fall and it's chilly this morning where I am. Can you share some insights for people about, just some basic insights from Ayurveda about how to improve the quality of your life?
Yeah, definitely. I guess the question is just where to start. So Ayurveda, let's say that we like to look at things in terms of like, what are the predominant qualities around us? What are the predominant qualities around us? And what are the predominant qualities inside of us? And when we can observe those things, it allows us to create our own guide for how to go about life, right? So it's kind of the as above, so below idea. Like, what's going on with our relationship to the sun. So right now we're in equinox time. Mm-hmm. And the days are starting to become shorter, and the days are starting to become colder, and maybe the wind is starting to blow. It very much depends on the place that you live, of course. But generally speaking, these qualities start to come up. So maybe a little drier, a little more movement in the air. There's this crisp quality. And so we can look at what's called Ritu Charya, which is like a seasonal routine. Mm-hmm. And in this season, what would the routine be? And then we can translate that into our personal routine, which is referred to often as Dinacharya, a daily routine. Mm-hmm. So a daily routine for fall season might be transitioning in terms of like what kind of foods you're eating, for example. In the summer, maybe we're eating a lot of, sun-ripened fruits and juicy fruits, and like watermelon's kind of a classic, right? It's very cool. It's very juicy. There's a lot of water. But as we move into the fall season, what's coming into season, things like apples, for example. And, the harvest is coming up. So we have all these root veggies coming out. And how do we prepare those? We cook them. We stew them, we make soups. There's all these natural things that we tend to do in this season that are also, there for a reason. They're very, very helpful and very grounding for us right now as the season is changing. The other thing to think about, I think, is anytime you have the word change involved, a transition or a change from one season into another, we think of the dosha Vata, and Vata is made up of air and ether. And so that very light, airy, changeable dosha can create those qualities in us too. More change, more lightness, which can be like spaciness, inability to sleep, feeling a little bit ungrounded. So things that kind of help bring that more into balance in our bodies are very helpful. Like grounding foods and grounding practices, for example. Is that making sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's great.
Good.
And then say like if it's the heat of summer or people in the other hemisphere are moving into spring, for example, and it's say more wet and cold, you'd balance in a different way.
Right. So again, whatever qualities, which are called gunas in Sanskrit and in Ayurvedic language, whatever gunas are predominant, we have to look at what those are creating in us. So if it's cold outside, it'll tend to create cold in the body. If it's hot outside, it'll tend to create heat in the body. So usually we're having to sort of balance that out by bringing in opposite qualities. Mm-hmm. So if it's cold and damp, then we still want to bring warmth, like soups and stews, like what I was talking about before. But that dampness needs maybe a little bit more dry quality coming in. So bringing in, for example, foods or practices that are a little bit more lightening and drying. In the spring, the sort of accumulation of, and this is a natural good thing, accumulation of fat, for example, because we're kind of having a more sedentary life in the winter. In the spring, that starts to liquefy a little bit. And we want to help that along by, having foods and herbs that say move the lymph, for example, and move the circulation and maybe a little bit of sweat. We get out and start exercising more after our time of hibernation, being inside and sleeping more. Mm-hmm. So we're really using what's going on in the environment outside as a guide, and also observing what's going on in ourselves. And we, again, create a guide for ourselves about how to move in the world based on what's happening there. So it's interesting with Ayurveda because Ayurveda looks at the individual as an individual, which means you can hear all these pieces of advice out in the world. You should do this, you should do that. And we're bombarded with that so much. But we, in some ways, don't have to listen to any of that because we just have to look at what's going on with us to know what to do. So we can receive guidance from, people giving us advice and practices and things like that. But we always have to ask the question, is that what's right for me right now? So Ayurveda is very much about learning yourself, getting to know yourself deeply, because it's the only way you can make those decisions not only on a daily basis, but really on a moment to moment basis.
I love that so much. It's so much about staying in relationship with what's here now in our environment and this today body.
Yeah, very much the today body, the right now body. Because yesterday, maybe I felt like I needed soup at this time, but today I need something completely different. Right?
So I'm probably going to conflate a few questions here, but I'm just going to let myself ramble and see what comes and get to it. But
okay.
So Ayurveda is considered the sister science to yoga, and these profound wisdom traditions come from India, obviously. And I remember many years ago, I first discovered Ayurveda when I was a teenager, and there was through an Ayurvedic cookbook, and that's predominantly Indian, right? And I know this is not about eating Indian food. It's about being tuned to, as you say, what's alive and noticing the qualities, right? So I'm also really struck by when you're talking about being in alignment with the seasons and responsive, how that has been traditional in so many different cultures, even though in the modern world, we tend to be so much more disconnected from it. So we were talking before I hit record, and just about the way Ayurveda can, learning in this way is more like a remembering.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about, India and whatever culture we happen to be a part of, both historically from our blood lineages, but where we live today, and also just that sense of remembering something that's natural and not superimposing somebody else's, culture or ideas on ourselves.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, so like you said, yoga and Ayurveda and the other sister sciences, which are Vastu, which is like Indian feng shui, we could say, and Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology, they all arose from the place we now call India.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, as these sciences grew and were passed down through the ages in that culture, the cultural and tribal and religious as well, mainly Hindu, but anyway, I won't go too far into that, sort of became a part of the medicine in a lot of ways. So of course, if you go out and buy, a lot of different Ayurvedic cookbooks are going to be, like you said, based on Indian food. If you go to study at an institution and study Ayurveda, there might be some, pujas and rituals around Hindu gods and goddesses. And it's sort of neither here nor there. I mean, it's nice, I think, to respect the culture where these practices and sciences come. And of course, the lineage of our teachers who are teaching us. My teacher comes from India. And so, he's doing pujas before class a lot of times. And I can easily take part in that and respect that. Mm-hmm. But, to me, Ayurveda can also be very much applied to any lifestyle, a person living in any place in the world. And, we don't have to bring any of those pieces in. So if I were to write a cookbook, not being a person who comes from Indian culture, I won't be, it won't involve Indian food so much, right? Because it's just not my lineage. It's not my culture. And I actually haven't spent that much time in India. But I do believe, like you mentioned, that we all come from people who knew how to live in harmony with the seasons and with the flow of daily life. And, they certainly went to bed more or less with the sun and awakened more or less with the sun and followed the moon cycles in terms of, raising their crops or working with their animals, working with their medicinal plants. It depends how far back you go and who you're talking about. But we all come from people who understood and respected medicine, and it's just a way of living, I suppose, in any culture. And you go far enough away from your own lineage, or you go forward enough in time, and we seem to have lost a lot of these things. Of course, we can still find people and places who are very much intact and connected with practices that are, sort of their versions of Ayurveda, perhaps, or their traditional systems of medicine. But most of us, let's say, especially in the US, are not connected anymore to our lineage. And so we go looking. Where can I find this? Where can I find something that I resonate with, that can support me? I happen to find Ayurveda. You found Ayurveda as well, like you said, in your teen years. But anyway, I'm kind of losing the thread of what you were asking me. Where can I go from here to answer your question?
Yeah. I think we're in the territory of it. It's just something about, and maybe another way I want to ask this, it's something that I've heard you mention in another piece that you shared about the way, how do I want to say this? The way to approach Ayurveda isn't like I'm doing a celery juice cleanse or I'm being paleo or something like that, although any one of those things could be under the umbrella of Ayurveda. I love the way you've talked about it as an umbrella.
Yeah.
And also less I think you said something about it being less adopting certain practices and more like a long-term plan for, a thriving life, something like that.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Let's see.
I know it's such a big topic.
It is. It's like where to start. Okay. Let's start with the umbrella because it is how I tend to describe Ayurveda.
Yeah.
And it's how I sort of bring Ayurveda from an ancient context into a modern context, which is, if you read the Vedic texts, you're like, wow, I'm supposed to get a goat bladder and fill it with this medicinal tea and insert that into the rectum. And then if I do that, 3 times a day, I mean, there is that. And it's really interesting to read. I mean, I absolutely love reading the ancient Ayurvedic texts, but obviously we have to bring that into the world we're living in right now. So the way that I've decided to think about this is Ayurveda is an umbrella, and we can put anything under that umbrella. Any practice, any food, any medicine, anything, because it's all about how it affects the individual. And is it, going back to those gunas, the qualities, what effect is it having on the qualities? And is it bringing balance, or is it moving us further out of balance? So any practice, any medicine, anything can be medicine, anything can be poison. And that is in the ancient texts. Anything can be medicine and anything can be poison because it depends on for whom, when, with what, and how much. Mm-hmm. Those are questions that Ayurveda asks. So I have to be able to figure out, what's the effect of if I sit and look at the screen on my cell phone for 6 hours in a row, that will generate certain qualities in my body, mind, spirit complex, of course. And that will be listed in the Ayurvedic text. So I have to have this way of looking at things in order to, figure out what sort of effect things are having. When we want to stay in balance, we have to, make a map for ourselves, basically, in that way. So we can, I can look at a paleo diet and a keto diet and intermittent fasting and, ice baths and anything that's like really in popular culture right now and everyone's talking about, and go, what would that do? Mm-hmm. What effect would that have on me or this person that I'm working with or my family member? And would that bring balance, or would that perhaps exacerbate issues?
Mm-hmm. I love those 4 questions. Can you say them again? So like, say, for example, somebody says, should I do ice baths, or should I be eating a, vegan raw diet or something like that? Then the question is not yes for everyone or no for everyone.
Right. So I say a vegan diet for who? When? With what? And how much?
Right.
right? So if I don't know you and I can't see you and you're saying, should I eat a vegan diet? I have to ask more questions to understand if that's the right path. And of course, we have to consider not just what's going on in physiology, et cetera, but what's the person's nature? What are they comfortable with? If you're asking about a vegan diet, it might be that person says, I simply cannot bring myself to eat meat. Okay, we start there. That's important to you. Now, what kind of vegan diet should you eat? What should we actually, fill up that diet with? What should be the qualities of the food? When should you eat it? What time would be best for you? And how long should you go between meals? And, so we have to know a lot of things about that person in order to answer those questions. Maybe it's a pregnant woman, very different recommendation for her compared with, somebody who's not pregnant, for example.
Right. Yeah. I love this so much, and how, what do I want to say? The patience it takes. I mean, this is true of so many things I love. and I can think of just a long list. It's not this quick fix kind of Western view where you go have a 10-minute consult with a doctor who's rushing you through to get this kind of result. And I love the way you're also talking about that it's long-term. It's not like immediate, but what we do in the immediate is so important to the long-term, and remembering that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's true. It's, in some ways, it's sort of antithetical to what people are wanting right now.
Yeah, it's true. Same with our work, the slow kind of embodiment work. It's not a quick fix,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, even people who are going around looking for the quick fix usually eventually come around to the idea that isn't working.
Right.
For them. And then they finally come and say, okay, tell me about this. Where do I start?
Yeah. Okay, I have another sort of double question. We'll see how this comes. So I have this little piece of paper on my fridge as a reminder that I probably wrote, 20 years ago or something like that. And it comes from one of the Ayurvedic texts. And it says, without proper food, medicine is of no use. And with proper food, medicine is of no need. I just love that orientation toward these choices we make really can make a difference. If I'm taking some beneficial medicine, but I keep, say, eating something that's bad for me or whatever, just how important that is and how we can tend to compartmentalize, right? So earlier also you were talking about really knowing what's right for my body today. And I know sometimes, what do I want to say? I absolutely believe that there's a wisdom in our bodies that guides us toward, the next right thing, the wellness, the best next step, all of that. And sometimes there's like cravings for the exact terrible thing. So how do you trust the guidance of your body around making choices around food, and when it's a healthy craving and when it's something that's taking us more out of whack?
Yeah.
Let me just add to that, to speak personally. Like, I know, speaking of doshas, I have pitta kapha dosha, and I love pitta aggravating foods. Like, I love hot and spicy. I love my black coffee. I love, sometimes a big glass of red Cabernet or something like that. I tend to crave what is pitta aggravating. And sometimes the opposite is true too, but just wonder what you'd say about that.
Yeah. Well, just to go to the very beginning of that, which is your statement that you were saying that you've had sitting there for so long. I mean, food, I like to say food is the first medicine. And I know that's written somewhere as well. Let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food, which is not coming from Ayurveda, but that's another way to like talk about that aspect. But really the way I look at that, my answer for why that is true is that the things that we do most often are going to have the most impact in a lot of ways, right? So we eat food let's say 3 times a day. We eat 3 meals a day. And then of course, if we have snacks, it's even more than that. So to ask an herbal medicine that you're taking this tiny quantity of maybe twice a day, to ask that to balance against everything that you're eating that may not be bringing you into balance is folly, right? I mean, it just doesn't really make sense. So, really looking at what you're eating as your first medicine is super important, because if you just continue to eat things that are bringing you more out of balance, and drink things that are bringing you more out of balance, it'll be really hard to find balance. I think, just makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So food being the first medicine, and not only what you're having, but when you're having it, because you have to be able to digest everything that you take in. And Ayurveda talks a lot about, not only digestive fire, but senses. So we have to digest in some way or another everything that comes in anywhere. So it comes in through the mouth and we digest it through the digestive tract, but also things that we take in through the ears and the eyes and the nose, etc., have to be digested in one way or another.
Right. That's huge.
Yeah, it is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that we can't digest either has to be eliminated, or it can actually turn into, Ayurveda calls it ama, which is like sometimes translated as toxic, morbid substance. I love about Ayurveda and about some of these Indian teachers who are teaching in the West, because we get those translations that sound like dun dun dun, like it's the scariest thing in the world.
Right.
So moving on from there, then if we're looking at cravings and healthy cravings and not so healthy cravings, and what brings us into balance, one of the things that Ayurveda talks about is that the more we are already in balance, the more we tend to crave things that bring us more balance, and the more we're out of balance, we tend to crave things that move things in that direction.
That's the catch-22, isn't it?
It's totally the catch-22.
Yeah.
So that's where the sort of idea of prajna parada comes in. And prajna parada is one of the ways to translate it. This is another one of the dun dun dun, or hyperbole maybe, is crimes against wisdom. not listening to your intuition.
Right.
Would be maybe like a more understandable way to say that. Not listening to your intuition. So when you want a big glass of Cabernet and it's a hot summer evening, and you know that you're pitta predominant, and just for those listening out there, pitta predominant means that we have a lot of fire in the constitution, and red wine would be a fiery type of alcohol. And then alcohol, even just by nature, is very fiery. It's hot and it's sharp, right? Which are fiery qualities. And so that's definitely going to add to those qualities. Whereas if we had lavender mint tea, we would bring some cooling into that big fiery, thing happening in the body.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that it's bad. I just want to say that, though. I don't believe in good and bad. And I also don't believe in once you do something, you should not feel bad about it, because why torture yourself that way?
Yes.
We can use this knowledge and the practices that are part of it to torture ourselves. We definitely can.
I've done that.
Yeah, I have too.
Made myself feel bad about, everything I was eating. Or I think I used to be a little bit of when I first learned about Ayurveda, this is my pitta nature, right? Really being a little bit of a Nazi about it. And one of the things I love about you and your way with it is you're so not like that. Like, we've also hung out and had a margarita together, or, it's not like being a purist or some kind of fundamentalist about pure diet or something like that, but just understanding how what we're doing affects us.
Yeah, exactly. And that is my way. I'm also very much a pitta person, but I don't tend to have that perfectionist nature. Whereas, a perfectionist nature would be a pitta type of nature.
Mm-hmm. Thank God I don't anymore.
I mean, I think it's important to think about or feel into, depending on how you want to consider that, what might be the thing to do right now that would both bring balance and also hopefully some enjoyment. And then once the decision is made, just go with it and fully enjoy it. You know, if it's a wrong decision, you'll probably pay for it in one way or another later, which just helps to inform decisions down the road, right? I mean, it's such a path of self-discovery. Just being in life is a path of self-discovery, but especially when you're using tools like Ayurveda to live your life, it is really a path of self-discovery. And there's no such thing as, you know, perfect life, perfect routine, perfect balance. I mean, you know, by nature, so you were talking about how you're Pitta predominant and Kapha secondary. Those are tendencies, and we're all born with some predominant tendency and, you know, some kind of patterning. And when, for example, a person is Pitta predominant, Pitta tends to go high naturally. It's the nature of things. Pitta will tend to go high. So I don't really believe in always trying to achieve this perfect balance. And I see that a lot in the Ayurvedic world, like, you know, speaking about things in such a way that, you know, it's right to do this and it's not right to do that. And, you know, I think one of the things that's important to say is, yes, it's good to be on a path of balance. I think it leads to a joyful, happy, healthy life. And yet to understand that in some ways the natural state is moving toward imbalance in one direction or another. So it's a journey. We're never arriving.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. I remember when I first learned about crimes against wisdom, Prajnaparada, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but just that I remember feeling such relief that there's an ancient Sanskrit word for this. You know, when you know better and you do it anyway, like that's not, it's just a human tendency, and to have a sense of humor about that, I think is really important.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think to have a sense of humor is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. Like I can have a sense of humor right now about my dog barking. But yeah, you know, it's funny because one of the things that I think is really funny that comes up a lot, especially teaching Ayurveda to other people, is that when we translate, and you know, I've just kind of joked about that in a couple of different expressions, but when we translate what's coming from the ancient texts, a lot of times it is, or at least it sounds like hyperbole, right? Like, if you do this, isn't far behind, you know, like there's this saying that comes from the ancient text. If you stand while eating, death stands over your shoulder. That's another one, right? Which is basically just to say, sit down, take your time, breathe, and eat and enjoy. Don't stand there eating or drive eating or, you know, move around while eating.
This is so great. So let's just talk about some of these practical, basic things like that probably we know, even if we're, you know, doing the crime against wisdom. Like, what do you think are some basic Ayurvedic understandings or principles that are helpful for people in the modern world who might be disconnected from those knowings?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, learning to observe what's going on in your body, mind, soul, spirit complex. In Ayurveda, of course, we don't separate those things. It's one being, right? What's going on and what would be an opposite thing that might bring balance. That's, you know, one important principle. But I also just looking at the way the world is right now and how everything's moving so quickly and things are coming at us. One way to look at that is that all of that and all of our being in the world and all of our running around doing this and that and FOMO and all of that stuff that seems to be such a big part of living in the world right now is very, what we would use the Sanskrit word langana, right? We would use that in yoga and Ayurveda. Or we could say it's catabolic. It's breaking down, it's lightening, it's breaking down, it breaks the body down in a way. And that if we're bringing an opposite quality, which is what we do in Ayurveda, we want to look at things that are anabolic, which in Sanskrit is brahmana or bruhana. And I really think that almost everybody needs more of that. So what are things that have that quality? More rest.
Yeah.
More sleep, actually. And not just more sleep, but sleep at sort of the right hours. Like going to bed early has more of an anabolic or brahmana quality than staying up until 2 and sleeping until 10, for example. Right? So moving with the natural rhythms of nature is more anabolic. Moving with the sun, moving with the moon. Doing nothing. Doing more nothing and doing less something. Seriously, that is, I feel like that right there can accomplish so much to helping so many people. I like to call it unscheduling. That's my word lately. Especially with respect to children, because with children, there's this idea among some people that, they need to learn as much as possible in a really short amount of time. So let's have them do gymnastics and horse riding and extra reading lessons, etc., throughout the week after school, right? So in the unscheduling idea, they would maybe just have one thing they do once a week. And otherwise, it's basically school and as much nothing as possible.
Right. I think that's so important. I know we both have, young kids, and that my little one broke his arm last week, as I told you. And so we're pausing on, he does a martial arts class, an Aikido class. And I almost feel like even that, we just are getting back into the fall school season again. And like, that's just school feels like so much, and I know so many of his friends are scheduled to, the nth degree with all those things you named, and I'm with you. And also just want to say, I know this, and I'm so appreciating the reminder to myself right now of doing a lot more nothing. It's just so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lately, the way I've been thinking about doing more nothing is in the realm of children, because especially young children, like the age that our kids are, 2nd and 3rd grade, and I have one that's in preschool still. They don't need to be doing much, because naturally, as they get older, they'll be doing more and more. That happens naturally. We don't have to make that happen. And then we find, obviously as adults, that there's a whole lot of a million things to be doing.
Right.
So actually, just kind of moving against that a little and doing less and less, because we're still going to be doing a lot, even if we do less and less, is, I think it's a good thing. And it is really supportive to, like, what do we see a lot in the world right now? I feel like I see a lot of worry and anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Here. And a lot of times people that are experiencing anxiety, for example, this is a big one. I don't remember hearing a lot when I was younger about people having anxiety. So some of it might be that it's just more okay to talk about and bring out into the world. And I think a lot of it is just that things are just moving more and more quickly all the time. So, what would be the best remedy for something like anxiety? According to Ayurveda, it would be to rest more, to do less, to stay, to be in places where we can feel grounded, which is oftentimes our home. And to do practices that are really grounding and building. So Ayurveda is really big on oil therapies, and oil is one of those things that when we put oil on the body, it immediately grounds the nervous system. So the anxiety tends to abate, and then, suddenly we can sleep better, and, all of our nervous system issues that might be showing in different ways, like tics and tremors and shaking and, that sort of thing, tends to abate as well.
Right.
So that's another, bringing oil in is another grounding and anabolic support.
So just practically, I mean, I know about this from, historically, but thinking about people who are hearing this for the first time, um, can you talk about when you would do that? What kind of oil would you do? If you only have a short amount of time, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me just describe it a little bit more, because I've noticed that it's not intuitive to use oil in this way for most of us. We would use an oil that, of course, has the qualities that balance us the most. So if we're, a colder constitution, or if it's a cold time of year, we might use a warming oil, which is usually going to be sesame oil. Or if we have a hot constitution, or if it's a hot time of year, we might use something cooling like sunflower oil or coconut oil, or a blend. And then, of course, we can infuse those oils with herbs, which Ayurveda is really big on too, because one big way to absorb medicine is actually through the skin. So we can make that into a medicinal practice too. Okay, so we choose an appropriate oil, and then we want to do practices like that, pretty much everything like that, on an empty stomach. Or at least, we've pretty much digested our last meal. So first thing in the morning is a good time, or last thing at night is also a good time. We don't want to be subject to, winds and drafts and things like that. So a closed bathroom that's, adequately warm is a good idea. You want to protect your floor, put down an old rug or an old towel, and then you just get the oil warm enough, either in your hands or in the sink, to not have it be a shock to the body. It needs to be like body temperature. And you apply that oil all over the body, and not in a way of like how you would put on lotion. You're not just moisturizing your skin. You're actually like really kind of dousing the body in oil, starting from the scalp and, kind of generally moving downward through the body is a good way to do it. And taking the time actually to not just go, okay, I'm doing my oil, like how we do a lot of things in life, but actually making that a practice of self-love, because oil, according to Ayurveda, it really equates with love. There are words that mean love and oil kind of all at the same time, like the word sneha.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So making this a practice of self-love, and, really taking the time to massage the body. Lots of oil, like a couple ounces even in each session, and then letting it sit and soak in for a few minutes. If a person doesn't have a lot of time, it's okay to rinse it off more quickly. But if the time is there, then actually taking, 10, 20 minutes to let it soak in. And then after the oil has been applied and hopefully has soaked in a little bit, getting in a really warm shower. I like to instruct people to not soap the oil off their skin, but just soap the strategic areas, the areas that you really need to wash. Because even when you first turn the shower off, sometimes you think there's still oil in your skin, but usually it has either soaked in, or it's actually soaked in and then kind of rinsed off. Still, it's better to use an older towel when you dry off, so that you don't feel like you're ruining your things. And then, if you put it on your scalp, obviously you need to really wash your hair. If you're in a hurry that morning, but you really want to do it, you just don't have a lot of time, then I tell people, just put your hair up. Don't put it on your scalp that time, but really make sure you do the rest of your body and your feet, right? Everywhere. We put oil everywhere. Don't skip any areas. Massage the earlobes really well. Yeah.
So I remember many years ago when we brought Jayashree to Salt Lake City and we were learning with her together here. And I asked her, what do you think is the most important thing from Ayurveda for modern people right now? And I thought for sure she was going to say, quit drinking coffee or something like that. I was bracing for it, And she said, this practice of self oil massage, and it's so simple and so beautiful and really powerful. So I love that you're bringing that.
It really, really is. And it's simple, and it's powerful. It's grounding. It can help you sleep. Like I said, it's brahmana or anabolic. brings down vata. So it helps things like anxiety and insomnia, which are kind of two big ailments that are really, really common. But it also keeps us young. I mean, you can also do this from the perspective of, I want my skin to look really great for the rest of my life, or for as long as possible.
Yeah.
My teacher, Dr. Ladd, says it removes wrinkles, and he talks about, the dry body, the body without oil is like a dry stick, and it can break. But when we bring oil in and we massage it into the body, it penetrates all the levels. It's not just your skin that you're putting oil on. It actually penetrates deeply into the body and lubricates every part of the body eventually, especially if you use sesame oil. Or a sesame blend. So yeah, I think it's a really amazing practice for our time.
That's so great. So I want to ask about digestion. And I know you could probably talk for 2 years about this, because Ayurveda has such an sophisticated map of what happens. And I only have a vague memory of this, but like that what I eat today makes its way through different tissue systems over 35 days or something like that. And just in speaking about, I was so struck to be reminded when you said before about we have to digest everything that's coming in, like, news and, social media and the people we're interacting with, and let alone our food and drink and just our life circumstances. And it's huge what's happening, what we're carrying psychically, with climate crisis. And so I wonder if you would just talk a little bit, whatever you want to say about that, because I know you could say a lot. So we'll just get whatever's inspiring to you right now about the map of digestion and how it makes its way to our deep bodies, and also how to support ourselves in the overwhelming world right now with digesting not just food, but information and circumstance.
Yeah. Okay. It's really important. I'm glad you brought that up. So I like to call the fire in the belly the mother fire. Because it has a Sanskrit name as well, but that's our mother fire. And we want to not only protect that fire, and I like my teacher's instruction on thinking about that as almost like a literal fire, like a campfire. You don't want to douse it with cold water, for example, and you don't want to put food on top of food on top of food. You want to put things in that feed the fire and then allow the fire to take the time to burn that away and then kind of grow again and become strong before you put the next thing in. So there's protection for that mother fire. And that mother fire, if it becomes, a little bit dim, we can add things in, medicines, for example, that help to brighten it and make it stronger. And sometimes it's too strong and we need to bring things in that actually make it a little bit more mellow, let's say. That mother fire feeds all the fires in the body and the mind and senses, because according to the Ayurvedic view, there are fires everywhere. There's a fire in the mind, there's a fire for each sense. There are several fires in the liver that translate into breaking down the food that we take into the different 5 elements. And then, like you mentioned, we have fires also that are responsible for governing each tissue, and there are 7 tissues in Ayurveda. So the food goes in, and within 5 days, it is transformed into the matter that's considered to be the first tissue, which is called rasa, and that's is one layer of our blood. We call it blood plasma. And then in another 5 days, it moves into the other component of our blood, which is red blood. And it moves on through the different tissues. So then we have, muscle, and we have bone, and we have nerves, and we have reproductive tissue. We have fat, which I forgot, which comes earlier. But each layer or each piece of time before it moves into the next component, the next tissue layer, takes about 5 days. Reproductive tissue is the very last. So reproductive tissue is like the super fine, sort of most refined level. If there is a breakdown at any level in that process, then the tissue that comes next isn't being properly fed, or it's either being like overnourished, or it's being undernourished, or it's being burned too much, or it's not being, transformed well enough. Does that make sense? So in order to take care of all of that, we need to take care of our mother fire first and foremost. And then, when we're paying attention, like we've been talking about sort of throughout our conversation, to balancing qualities, et cetera, then we'll also be working sort of indirectly maybe, or directly, on the fires in the body and in the senses and in the mind. So tending that fire is probably job one. So what quantity of food, coming back around to the beginning of our conversation, what quantity, what quality, what should it be right now? What is the most, the best thing to be having that will protect and feed the fire in a good way? And then, there are other things that we can do. So what we take in through our senses, which I also touched on, that has to be sort of a right proportion and a right quality too. If I sit and watch the news and really disturbing things for hours each night, in a way, that's a misuse of my senses. And Ayurveda does talk a lot about this, even outside the realm of digestive fires. Misuse of the senses definitely leads to a lot of different imbalances. So just understanding, I think when we start to understand that it does matter what we take in. It's not like I can just sit and watch violent movies and watch, really awful things that happened on the news and just, kind of let it bounce off me. That stuff goes in, and it does need to be digested in one way or another. And some of us are a little more resilient in that way, and some of us are a little less resilient, and we're really sensitive in that way. So we have to really respect the sensitivities that we have to those things. Even, and then a different sense of smell, for example. Essential oils are really big right now in the world, right? A lot of people are using essential oil for this and that and the other thing. We have to digest that though, right? So if we are bombarding ourselves with smells all the time that we can't quite digest, then, we create illness in some way.
Right.
Right?
So I love this image of the mother fire and thinking about it as a campfire. And I love what you said about not dousing it with ice water, for example. That's something from Ayurveda, right? Not a lot of icy stuff going into your belly. What are some other ways you can, like, if all this sounds overwhelming, for example, like, oh my God, I'm imagining somebody thinking, I barely have time to eat or prepare something. And now I have to think about the quality of that and the other. Like, it takes care, and I appreciate that it does. But what are some simple ways of caring for your mother fire?
Yeah, really simple would be keeping in mind that it is a fire. Like you said, like I said, putting things in that are cold are not ideal. Doesn't mean you can never indulge in ice cream or never have iced tea, but to not indulge in those things on a very regular basis would be better. Also, we want to do things like hydrate ourselves more between meals than around mealtime, because what happens if I'm taking in food and giving that to my mother fire, but I also drink 16 ounces of liquid, even if it's not cold, I'll tend to dilute that and put the fire out. So hydrating between meals, just little sips of liquid with meals. The other thing I think that's easy to remember is to allow space between your meals or your snacks. So fire, what does fire need? I mean, if you really think about fire, I think most people have built fire at one time or another in their lives. You can't just put a huge pile of wood on top, right? Or you put the right amount and then you need to let it burn for a certain amount of time before you can put the next log on. It's exactly the same with digestive fire. So the digestive process takes about 5 to 6 hours. So ideally, we don't put another meal in for 5 to 6 hours. That's not easy for some people. we definitely have to look at what else is going on. Some people, they'll need something between. Okay, take something between, but let it be really easy to digest, like a piece of fruit. It takes the digestive fire about a half hour to digest just a simple piece of fruit. So just letting it be simple is another, really easy thing. So not drinking a ton of liquid around meals, really minimizing the cold and frozen, and allowing space between meals. And sometimes this takes time to work up to, right? Like if we, feel extreme hunger and we're just kind of hungry all the time, we might have to actually train ourselves into this new pattern. And it is doable to train ourselves into a new pattern. We just have to get used to it. So those are a few really simple things, I think, that are, sort of easy to do. And when the digestive fire is really feeling weak or sluggish, there are certain, medicines we could take, but one of the easiest ones is just a small cup of ginger tea with meals will help to support the digestive fire.
I love that. And I love ginger tea.
Yeah, me too. Some people have a real aversion to ginger. So, we can certainly find other things that can help, but a little bit of ginger tea with meals and, just sticking with that pattern over time, even if it doesn't seem to work at first, because that's kind of how life is sometimes. Things feel really foreign and kind of impossible. And then suddenly, when we give it a little time, it feels completely doable and things start to feel better.
I think it's so true what you said about, like, the more you come into balance, the more you feel, oh yeah, it doesn't feel good when I have a giant icy something in my belly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's self-rewarding, as we start to make our way in. I know one of the things that Ayurveda says is the largest meal of the day should be lunch and lighter for, breakfast or dinner. And I know that's true in my body. I feel that my digestion would prefer that. And just with kid in school and wanting to have a family meal time together, I don't do that.
Yeah, that's actually one of the biggest things that I help people with, because that is a big deal, wanting to eat with your loved ones, which I do think is so, so important. And you're right. We, again, if we're looking at what's going on in the rhythm of the day with, our relationship to the sun, when the sun is highest is when our digestive fire is naturally the strongest. So that's midday. So having the largest meal in the middle of the day, which is, maybe between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., you have a window there, is the most natural thing for the body to do. But what happens if, we're kind of on the go during the day and at night we want to eat with our families? What I usually recommend is still trying to have lunch be sort of the main meal, and also the time that we eat maybe things that are, the most difficult to digest, like anything that's raw or meat, like salad. Let's say chicken salad, because it's meat and there's raw involved. Those are harder on the digestion than, for example, like a veggie soup. So we have that sort of thing in the middle of the day, but we want to eat with our family. My recommendation usually is go ahead and have the meal with the family, but just eat less of it. Whatever it may be, go for it, but eat a very small quantity of it, because naturally digestive fire is pretty low in the evening. And I think most people would nod their heads and go, oh yeah, when I eat a huge meal at dinner and then I try to go to bed a few hours later, I don't feel right. It doesn't feel good, right? It feels better to have the food mostly digested and taken care of before you're trying to sleep. So just eating a smaller quantity of whatever it may be. And, you can also arrange what you're eating to kind of go with the digestive fire too. Like eat a soup in the evening instead of a steak and potatoes, for example.
Right.
But if you're going to dinner with family at a restaurant, or you're going to, friends' houses for dinner, you eat what's being offered. So the best way to deal with that sort of situation is to just eat a small quantity of it and stop before you're really full.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to ask about just if you, I'm just thinking about how easy it is to be out of whack with natural rhythms. You can be staring at a screen, at 3 a.m. or stay up late, or, we can get so out of whack. What are some basic reminders? I know I love these kind of reminders of either ways to come into alignment with a natural rhythm. And another maybe facet of this is just like, what are some nuggets of wisdom from Ayurveda that you wish more people knew?
I think those two kind of go together when we talk about, we want to support the natural circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked early on in our conversation about dinacharya, the daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
And, simply, I guess, it's good to try to more or less go with what's going on with the daylight hours, for example. So waking up fairly close to sunrise, and in the evening, probably we're not going to bed with sunset, but not too long after, and not projecting a lot of light into our eyes, long after the sun has gone down. There's a lot of talk about this, like not looking at screens the last hour or two before bed, because it really does trick the brain into thinking that, the sun is shining on you and your hormone levels get all flipped around. So, that's one of the things that I think is, I think when I see somebody for the first time, this is kind of helping me kind of organize this a little bit. When I see somebody for the first time as a client, there's a couple things I'm looking at. One of the biggest ones is, are they arranging their life in such a way that it's going with a natural rhythm? If the answer is no, we really have to start there. Because even though I talked about how important the mother fire is, the mother fire won't be in balance if a person is waking up at noon and staying up until 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Because that just throws all of that out of balance. So maybe the sun goes down at 8, for example, and I think it's a great idea to be in bed by 10 o'clock. And for somebody who's really overworked, overstressed, maybe has small children or doesn't sleep well during the night, wakes up a lot, I highly recommend a pre-10 p.m. bedtime.
I love that.
Because our most,
last night so early. It felt so good.
Yeah. Our most restful sleep actually happens before midnight.
Mm-hmm.
And we can even talk about, Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, both. They look at what happens in the organ systems during those generally nighttime hours. That's when the entire body cleans and rejuvenates itself. So if we're awake at those times, the body can't do that. So going to bed, let's say by 10 p.m. And for some people, that's like, what? I do my best thinking, reading, writing, philosophizing, art at midnight. The reason why is because, again, this natural rhythm thing, that's one of the pitta times of day. So the fire of the mind really turns on at that time of night. That's why it's important to go to bed by 10 or around 10, because if you stay up much past 10, that fire really kicks in.
That second wind, totally.
Yeah. So you have to train yourself, though. When else can you be creative and philosophical and intellectual and, really have those juices turn on? There will be another time that will happen for you, but you have to just start, going with that. And then, like I said, waking up around sunrise, but I do think that people need at least 7. Most people need 8 hours of sleep. And like I said, a lot of people who are, kind of weak or overworked or stressed out actually need 9 hours for the endocrine system to, really be at its best. And you were asking, what do I wish people knew?
Yeah. Or if you could just say like, oh, I wish more people knew that if they did this, that would be a gift to their wellness,
Yeah. I feel like it's what we already talked about, which is I wish people knew that if they actually maybe did a little less and were actually okay, or found a way to be okay with doing some nothing, in quotes, doing nothing, that would actually be a medicine for most people.
That's so important.
For people who need to do something, we have practices. We have yoga nidra, which is yogic sleep, where you're actually lying on the floor and moving your consciousness around the body and doing some visualization, and it's actually said to be more restful than sleep, right? More rejuvenating to the body. So that's a wonderful practice. We talked about Abhyanga. That's a wonderful practice. Abhyanga being the oil massage. Yogasana, really helpful to move the circulation and, help to kind of keep the channels open, which is important because we don't want stagnation happening in the body. Going for a walk. I mean, if we need to do something, there are plenty of things that we can do that are still bringing us into balance and, supporting the grounding and, how do I want to say that? Just supporting the mind and not being too busy.
We all need to hear that.
Our minds are so busy.
So good. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I know we've just crossed our hour mark, and I don't want to keep you all day, but is there anything you want to say? And I'll record an additional bit of information for people, but anything you want to say right now about what you're offering or ways people can work with you or anything you're really excited about? I know you're making beautiful products these days too.
Oh, yeah. Well, I work with all people, but my specialty is working with women and women's health. I found in my studies that Ayurveda doesn't naturally orient itself that much to women specifically, and it tends to be women who are more than anyone else who are seeking guidance and practices, I find. So I work with women's health, and I can be found at mamaayurveda.com. And I lead seasonal cleanses around this idea that resetting ourselves and having kind of a touchstone at certain times of the year is really helpful, because we have all these intentions and we get off track, and then we need a place to come back to. So as much as anything, that's what my cleanses are about. And I've started making some medicinal products, which I've actually made for years, but I finally decided to offer these to more than just my clients. And those offerings are at mamaayurvedamedicinals.com. Right now, they are mostly sort of daily, I call them potions, daily potions in the form of powdered plant medicines that can be made into delicious drinks. Because I think that's a good way, at least right now in the world, it seems like a way that people like to take in their herbal supporters. And there are medicinal oils there, of course. We have to have oil on any Ayurvedic product website.
Yes.
Yeah, and I also, in addition to just supporting women's health, I really like to support the childbearing year, because I found that was a time that just needed lots of extra advice and help and support. So having navigated that realm myself a couple of times, I like to help people in that way too.
So wonderful. Thank you so much, Sunny. Thank you for this time, and thank you for the work you do in the world. And I'm just delighted to share this with our listeners.
Thank you, Erin, for having me. And thank you too for the work you do and for bringing these great pieces of lovely conversation into the world in the form of your podcast. I'm really grateful.
Oh, it's so my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, it's great if you want to share it with friends or post about it on social media. Also, you could make a donation to support the podcast or find out more information about our classes and offerings at our website, embodimentmatters.com.